Young
has been
seamstress
too
buys
long.
coffee for a
Yes,
poor
it
old
has.
man. Then his son appeared and changed her life. On a bitter winter night in Chicago, a young seamstress with empty pockets stepped into a cafe she couldn't afford. Her hands shook as she offered a cup of coffee, not for herself but for the shivering old man outside. What she didn't know was that this act would rewrite her entire life. The numbers refused to change no matter how many times Claire Bennett counted them. 3 20s, 2 10s, a 5, and a small pile of coins that barely made $10. Her sewing machine hummed weakly in the corner of the apartment, the rhythmic click-click of its tired motor, the only sound breaking the silence. It was past midnight, and the room was freezing. The radiator had given up weeks ago. Claire wrapped her thin cardigan tighter around herself, breath visible in the cold air. Bills lay scattered on the table, electricity overdue, rent warning in red ink, and one letter she couldn't bear to look at again. Application declined. Her scholarship for the Fashion Institute had been rejected. We regret to inform you. The words burned through her every time she closed her eyes. Claire had dreamed of designing clothes that made people feel seen, beautiful, confident, strong. But now her dream was reduced to repairing zippers and shortening hems in a city that didn't even notice she existed. She looked at her phone. 1:12 a.m. Her eyes moved to the small framed photo on the shelf, her mother, smiling under the old tailor shop sign. "You can build a life with your hands," she used to say. "Every stitch holds a piece of your heart." Claire whispered softly into the cold air. "I'm trying, Mom." Her stomach growled, breaking the silence. She hadn't eaten since noon, but the few dollars she had left were meant for groceries tomorrow. She couldn't risk touching them now. Outside, snow fell heavily, coating the narrow Chicago streets in white. Claire pressed her forehead against the frosty window pane and watched the flakes dance in the streetlight. The world looked peaceful out there, but inside everything was falling apart. Morning light spilled through the dusty windows of Needle and Thread, the tiny tailor shop she'd inherited from her mother. The sign above the door was fading, the paint peeling from years of rain and sun. Inside, bolts of fabric leaned against the wall like tired soldiers. The air smelled faintly of cotton, thread, and dreams that had grown old. Claire arrived early, just like every day. She flicked on the old lamp and brushed snow off her coat. The shop was small, just one sewing table, a mirror for fittings, and a rack of clothes waiting to be picked up. Yet it felt like a cathedral of memories. "Let's see if we can make today better," she murmured, flipping the sign to open. By noon, only one customer had come, a tired nurse named Maggie who needed a uniform patched. "How much?" Maggie asked, handing her the garment. $6, Claire replied. Maggie smiled apologetically. "You should charge more," Claire just shrugged. "People don't come here for expensive. They come because they need help." As the nurse left, Claire added the $6 to a small tin box beneath the counter. It wasn't much, but it was something. Hours passed. The snow outside thickened. She fixed buttons, mended sleeves, adjusted hems, but with each stitch she felt her hope thinning. At 6 p.m., her landlord stopped by. Mr. Graham, a man with a kind face but tired patience. "Claire," he began softly, "I've given you 3 extensions already. If you can't make the payment by next week, I'll have to list the shop for rent." Her heart sank. "Please, I just need a little more time. Business is slow, but it'll pick up after the holidays," he sighed. "I hope so, kiddo." "I really do." After he left, Claire sat behind the counter and looked at her hands, calloused dry. Trembling, her mother's voice echoed again. "Every stitch holds hope." But tonight, she couldn't feel any. That night, the radio warned of a blizzard moving in from the north. Temperatures will drop to -15. Avoid unnecessary travel. Unnecessary. Everything Claire did these days felt necessary. She needed groceries, thread, and fabric. Most of all, she needed something to hold on to. a reason to believe tomorrow would come. By 8 p.m., the streets were nearly deserted. She locked up the shop, bundled her scarf around her neck, and headed to the nearby grocery store. Snow bit at her cheeks, the wind sharp and cruel. Inside the store, fluorescent lights hummed. Claire moved slowly down the aisles, counting prices in her head. Bread, milk, a bag of rice, and a can of soup. Her cart looked sad, barely half full. At the checkout, the cashier said, $14.25. Claire handed over a 20. As she took the change, she noticed an old man sitting on the bench outside the window. His coat was paper-thin and his hands were trembling around an empty coffee cup. Something twisted in her chest. She turned to the cashier. "Excuse me, how much is a small coffee?" $2.10, he replied. She hesitated. Every dollar mattered. Every coin was survival. But she remembered her mother's words. Kindness is never wasted, even when you have nothing left to give. "Can I get one to go?" The cashier handed her the cup, steam curling into the cold air. Claire stepped outside, the snow biting her face. The old man looked up in surprise. "I saw you sitting here," she said softly. "It's freezing. You should have something warm." He blinked, eyes watery and blue. "You didn't have to." "I know," she said, handing him the cup. "But maybe I did." He smiled faintly, lifting the cup with shaky fingers. "God bless you, miss. You remind me of someone I once knew." Claire smiled back, but inside something heavy stirred, like fate had paused to take a breath. The old man's name was Walter. He told her between sips that he used to work in a machine shop before it closed down years ago. His wife had passed from cancer, his son moved away, and since then he'd been drifting. "I'm not homeless exactly," he said with a weak chuckle. "Just between homes." Claire sat beside him on the frozen bench. Snow gathered in her hair, melting against her cheeks. She listened as he talked about his son, a young man who worked in some fancy office downtown, though they hadn't spoken in years. "I wasn't a good father," Walter admitted quietly. "When my wife died, I didn't know how to be there for him. I pushed him away, told him to make something of himself. But I guess I made him think he was better off without me." Claire looked down at her hands. "Sometimes we hurt people because we're hurting ourselves." He glanced at her, eyes soft. "You sound like you know that from experience." She smiled sadly. "Maybe I do." For a while they just sat there. The snow fell thicker. Cars passed, headlights glowing through the storm. When Walter shivered, she stood. "Come on, let's get you inside. There's a cafe down the block still open." He hesitated. I know," she said, smiling. "This one's on me." They walked together through the wind, two figures swallowed by white. Inside the cafe, the warmth hit them like sunlight. Claire ordered him soup and a sandwich. She just got a tea. As Walter ate, he kept glancing at her like she was someone from another life. "You remind me of my wife," he said softly. "She used to sew, always believed small acts could change the world." Claire looked at him, something breaking open inside her. Maybe she was right. The cafe door opened with a sharp jingle. A man in a black wool coat stepped in, brushing snow from his shoulders. He looked out of place among the quiet warmth of the small diner. Tall, confident, with eyes that searched the room like he was looking for something, or someone. Claire noticed Walter stiffen. His trembling hand froze over the spoon. "That's my son," he whispered. She turned. The man's eyes locked on Walter. His expression shifted, shock, disbelief, and something deeper. He walked toward them slowly, as if afraid the old man would vanish. "Dad?" Walter blinked, his mouth quivering. "James?" The cafe went silent. Even the hum of the heater seemed to fade. The young man's voice broke slightly. "I thought you were dead." Walter's eyes filled. "You stopped answering my calls. I didn't know where to find you." For a moment, neither spoke. Then James pulled out the chair and sat down across from him. Claire felt her throat tighten. She started to stand, wanting to give them space, but Walter grabbed her hand. "Stay," he said quietly. "Please." So she did. The son looked at her, curious but grateful. "You bought him this meal?" She nodded. He was cold. James's jaw tensed. "Thank you." "You didn't have to." Claire just smiled faintly. "I know." The three of them sat in silence for a moment. Snow still falling outside. Three strangers connected by one simple act of kindness that none of them fully understood yet. But destiny was quietly unfolding, and the night was far from over. A week passed since the strange encounter. Snow had begun to melt, but Evelyn's worries hadn't. Bills still lay unopened on the counter, and her sister's shoes had holes. Just as she finished stitching the last dress for the day, the shop bell chimed. She looked up to see a tall man in an elegant wool coat holding a small box. He introduced himself as Daniel Mercer, the owner of a major fashion firm in the city, and the son of the old man she had helped. Evelyn's heart raced. Daniel explained how his father had wandered out that night, escaping his hospital room after arguing with him about how the world treated people without compassion. "He told me," Daniel said softly, "that a young woman reminded him that kindness still exists. He had spent days looking for Evelyn, guided only by her shop's sign that his father remembered. Then he handed her the small box. Inside was a delicate golden thimble engraved with her initials, E.M. "My father wanted you to have this," Daniel said. "He said you sowed hope into a world that had forgotten how to care." Daniel wasn't just there to deliver gratitude. He had an offer. "We're expanding our brand," he said, "and I want you to design our new collection, not as a worker, but as a partner." Evelyn froze, unsure if she'd heard correctly. She was just a small-town seamstress with a handful of regulars and debts stacked against her. But Daniel's eyes were kind, steady. "My father believed in you," he said. "And so do I." Within months, Evelyn's life transformed. She moved her sister to a brighter apartment, enrolled her in school, and began working in a real studio for the first time in her life. Her designs, simple, heartfelt, and stitched with care, soon gained national attention. People admired not just her craft but the story behind it. The girl who gave away her last few dollars to a stranger and received back a destiny she'd never dared to dream. 1 year later, at the grand opening of her first official fashion show, Evelyn spotted a familiar figure in the crowd. The old man, frail but smiling, was seated in the front row, a steaming cup of coffee in his hand. Daniel helped him stand as applause filled the hall. The old man whispered, "You see, child? One act of kindness always comes back, stitched stronger than before." Evelyn's eyes glistened. In that moment she realized she hadn't just sewn fabric, she had sewn fate. Life has a strange way of returning what we give. Sometimes the smallest gesture, buying a cup of coffee for someone in need, can ripple into a miracle that changes everything. Kindness costs little, but its reward can be beyond measure. For a while, none of them spoke. The cafe's yellow light flickered softly, reflecting in the window like a memory. Outside, the snow piled higher, blurring the world beyond the glass. Inside, time seemed to hold its breath. Walter stirred his soup slowly, as if unsure this moment was real. James watched him with a mix of guilt and disbelief. His sharp suit and polished shoes looked out of place next to his father's torn jacket and trembling hands. Finally, Walter broke the silence. "You look different," he said quietly. James smiled faintly. "You look the same." His voice cracked slightly. "Older, maybe." Walter nodded, eyes downcast. "It's been a long time." 10 years, James said. "Since Mom's funeral." The air grew heavy between them. Claire lowered her gaze, her hands clasped around her cup of tea. She felt like she was intruding on something sacred and painful, but Walter's hand still held hers, grounding her there. "I'm sorry," Walter whispered. "I didn't know how to face you after she died. I said things I didn't mean." James's eyes softened. "And I said things I regret every day." They sat in silence again, the air filled with the sound of wind howling outside. Claire blinked back tears she didn't expect. She thought about her own mother, how she'd never gotten to apologize for the nights she'd argued, for not understanding how hard her mother had fought to keep the shop alive. Walter's voice trembled. "If I could go back," James interrupted, his tone breaking. "Then don't say sorry, just be here now." The old man's lips quivered. "I am. I promise I am." Claire smiled softly, clutching the cup that had long gone cold. It was strange sitting there with two people she'd just met, yet feeling like their pain belonged to her too. Maybe broken people recognized each other instinctively. That night something shifted, a quiet mending of a tear that time had once split apart. The snowstorm outside had grown fiercer. When they finally stepped out of the cafe, the wind was sharp enough to sting. James insisted on driving them both home. "Where do you live?" he asked his father, helping him into the car. Walter hesitated. "Nowhere in particular." James froze, then shut the door gently, his jaw tight. "Then you'll stay with me tonight. We'll figure things out tomorrow." Walter looked down, embarrassed. "I don't want to be a burden." "You're not," James said firmly, his voice quiet but resolute. Claire stood a few feet away, her breath fogging in the cold air. James turned to her. "Can I give you a ride home?" She shook her head. "No, thank you. My place isn't far." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. "If you ever need help with anything, call me." She hesitated but took the card. "You don't even know me," he smiled faintly. "You helped my father when no one else did. That's enough." She watched the car disappear into the swirling snow, its red taillights fading into white. For a long time she stood there in silence, her gloved hand gripping the card. "James Porter, CEO, Porter Design Group," it read. Claire's breath caught. The name sounded familiar. Fashion, high-end tailoring, luxury suits. She'd seen the brand tag countless times on expensive garments she could never afford to touch. And suddenly, she understood. The man she'd bought coffee for was the father of one of the city's most powerful designers. The next morning, Claire awoke to a strange sound, a knock at her door. She rubbed her eyes and shuffled to answer it, half expecting the landlord demanding rent again, but when she opened it, her breath caught. James Porter stood there, tall and solemn, holding a steaming paper bag. "Morning," he said softly. "I brought breakfast," Claire blinked. "You didn't have to." "I know," he interrupted gently, smiling. "But I wanted to." He stepped inside, careful not to track in snow. "Dad told me about you, about the shop, the work you do. He said you remind him of my mom." Claire looked away. "I don't know about that. She used to sew," he said. "Said a needle could fix more than fabric, it could fix hearts too." The words hung in the air, fragile and warm. They sat at her small table, eating in silence. Walter had stayed home, still too weak from the cold. When they finished, James stood and looked around the apartment, small, tidy, and full of fabric scraps. "You do all this alone?" he asked, touching a half-finished dress on the mannequin. "Yeah," she said quietly. "Business is slow, but it's honest." He nodded thoughtfully. "Come by my office tomorrow. I might have something for you." She frowned. "What do you mean?" "Just trust me," he said, smiling. "And bring some of your work." The next day felt unreal. Claire woke before dawn, nervous energy racing through her veins. She packed her best work. A few dresses, a hand-stitched jacket, and a skirt she'd made from leftover fabric her mother once used. When she arrived at Porter Design Group, her heart nearly stopped. The glass building towered over the street, sleek and intimidating. Inside, everything gleamed. Polished floors, bright lights, people in tailored suits moving with purpose. The receptionist smiled politely. "You must be Miss Bennett. Mr. Porter is expecting you." She followed the assistant up to the top floor. When the elevator doors opened, she stepped into a world that felt like a dream. Mannequins lined the walls wearing elegant designs, and sunlight poured through the massive windows overlooking the city. James was waiting by a long oak table, reviewing sketches. He looked up and smiled. "You came." Claire nodded, clutching her garment bag. "I almost didn't. This place feels too big for me." He laughed softly. It felt that way to me once too. She laid out her work carefully. Hand-sewn seams, delicate embroidery, clean lines, pieces full of quiet care. James studied them in silence, his fingers tracing the fabric. Finally, he looked at her. "These are beautiful," he said. "Raw, emotional, real. They have something money can't buy." Claire felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you." He took a breath. "How would you like to design for us?" "Freelance to start. A small line, your vision, your name beside ours." Her world tilted. "You're serious?" "As serious as gratitude can be," he said with a smile. "You gave my father kindness when no one else did. I think it's time the world gives some back to you." For days afterward, Claire worked like she'd never worked before. Her sewing machine became her heartbeat, steady, alive. The small apartment filled with color and thread, with late nights and quiet prayers whispered into the hum of fabric. Walter visited often, bringing tea and stories. "You know," he said once, smiling shyly, "James hasn't stopped talking about you." Claire blushed. "He's been too kind." "No," Walter replied softly. "He's been reminded that kindness still exists in a world that forgot how to slow down." James would drop by sometimes, reviewing her sketches, asking about her ideas. They'd talk for hours about design, about life, about the strange way pain could lead people to cross paths they were meant to walk together. One evening, as she sewed the final stitch on her first commission piece, a simple but elegant coat, she paused and looked at the window. Snow was falling again, just like the night she'd met Walter. She smiled, whispering to herself, "Every stitch is hope, Mom." And this time she believed it. The coat she'd finished that night would later hang in the front window of Porter Design Group, signed beneath in small, graceful letters, "Claire Bennett, Hope Collection." But destiny wasn't done yet, because one more storm was still waiting to arrive.